Thanks for joining us and welcome to the ACHPA Health Promoting Schools podcast. My name's Dr. Joe Scott, and I'm a senior lecturer in health and physical education at the University of Sunshine Coast. And I'm also a member of the ACHPA Health Promoting Schools Committee. Today, joining me is Dr. Brendan Moy, who's an associate professor in health and physical education at Queensland University of Technology. Prior to working at university, Brendan's taught HPE in Queensland schools for over 20 years. And over the last 17 years, he's researched an alternative physical education teaching approach, which is the constraints led approach. And he's applied that in his university teaching practice. Today, he's here to share his valuable insights with us on how we can enhance students' skill and motivation when using this alternative teaching approach. Thanks for joining us today, Brendan. We're really excited to have you and have this chat with you.
Yeah, pleasure, Jay. Look, thanks for that introduction, mate, and thanks for the opportunity. I suppose I'd like to start by saying there's a bit of a problem that HP is that disliked by so many students, and one of the reasons that comes up a lot is the way that it's taught. So the first issue is the traditional approach is not really meeting the needs of students. So, for example, so just so people understand what that drill-based approach is, it's like you do your warm up. Sometimes it's laps of the pool, of the oval, could be something like that. Then you do repetitive practice of a modeled um, movement behavior in a drill, and the teacher gives corrective feedback. And normally that lesson finishes with the application of those skills in a game. So, like it's a problem. It's got failings with regards to students' motivation because a lot of students can't replicate the ideal technique. And you and I have had a talk, Joe, about who could replicate Sally Pearson's hurdling technique or the technique of a butterfly or of a basketball player that's got a fantastic one-handed shot. So, like, failure is an issue, boredom for students. They become disengaged, passively participate, and the big issues there with their health because of that passive engagement, like, for example, social health and their physical health, their mental health. So they're the issues, and unfortunately, it's the way physical education has been taught, and it's a tradition. There's many reasons why it's taught that way. We're sort of victims of the military to an extent, if you know the history of PE. So, and the other really big thing is this skill acquisition failings because drills don't really facilitate transfer to the game. So I suppose the first thing to do is define a drill. So I think a drill, the way I define it, is the repeating a prescribed solution over and over again to the same problem. So it's like dribbling around markers. So the problem is dribbling around markers, and this is the solution. This is how you do it, and it's just repetitive. So the issue with that is it's predictable, it's repetitive, and guess what? A game is the exact reverse. It's unpredictable and it's variable. So there's the first issue. And the other issue with a lot of drills is it separates the technique from decision making and perception. So in a game, before you execute a technique, what you normally do is you perceive or you scan the environment, you read your opponent, you read the game, then you make a decision, and then you act in a drill. And it's based on the old skill acquisition theory about making it easier for people by removing the decision and the perception, and the teacher does that. And the other issue is, and I was just driving to an appointment this morning, I saw a tennis coach hitting balls from the net to all these little kids, which is lovely and all that. But at the end of the day, um, players have to learn how to read their opponent. And in a game, I'm pretty sure no one stands at the net with a basket full of balls and hits it to you. So that's another failing in the drill. And I know there's reasons why people do that. So just let me then introduce the constraints-led approach. Like, it's a really viable alternative that actually addresses all those failings I just mentioned. Um, if you wanted simple explanation, it'd be it's similar to the backyard. So if you think back in the day where we did play in the backyards, and I don't think a lot of students do that anymore, your skills actually are allowed to emerge through active exploration. And normally it's a fun, engaging setting, and there's no one telling you what to do and how to do it. So the type of approach we're talking about, for example, in swimming, I'll give you an example there. It's one week you work with a partner and you might do an activity where you set a challenge and see how far your partner can swim in 5 strokes. And the partner might then mark that distance. And then you go back to the start and your partner says, well, can you get this far in 4 strokes? So all of a sudden you've got this environment where there's autonomy. So you're not telling people how to swim. You're giving them a bit of an external outcome focus. And because you're giving them autonomy, you're giving them a chance to be competent because they'll come up with their own solution that works for them. It's so important in motivation to meet psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and the last one is relatedness or connection. So when students work together, they connect, and it's a relatedness. And the teacher as well isn't seen as the expert that is correctively giving feedback. So that's one of the things about the backyard, and the constraints-led approach does mirror that. The other thing is when it comes to those other skill acquisition failings like perception, decision making, and technique are practiced together. And I'll give you an example later on about that. And perceptions and actions are coordinated. So what you actually would see um, before you actually act, you need to practice that at training. And it's also variable, and learning is implicit, which is really important. So just from the theoretical perspective, the constraints that approach acknowledges the role of the environment in learning. So if you think back to how you learn to walk, how you learn to hit a ball, how you learn to throw, I bet you it was in the backyard environment. And it's not just the physical environment, it's the social environment. So that's sort of, if I had to explain it, and like it's a way to, so an environment's manipulated using constraints. We call them task constraints, and it's like rules, playing field dimensions, scoring procedure, opposition strategies, etc. I'll give you a beautiful little comment from a student when I got there and to think about their backyard and how they learned. And this is how people learn. And a beautiful comment this student said was, when practicing basketball, my cousin broke the perspex backboard, so my hoop didn't have one. The emergent behavior was that I learned to swish my free throws. So it's a great story about how you learn things by just exploring in an environment where it's fun. And if it's fun, you keep doing it. And that's one of the main things. So that's sort of how it differs in a nutshell, Joe, from the traditional approach.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, it's a really interesting alternative to that potentially predominantly taught drill based physical education that potentially plenty of us learn at university. But I know that there's a lot of people that are learning more contemporary approaches, and some of the things that you highlighted, things like creating autonomy, relatedness, and competence might be terms that some of our listeners have heard. But they may or may not be familiar with the constraints-led approach. So I guess if I was a teacher, a health and phys ed teacher that was listening today and thought, I like the sound of the constraints-led approach, but I'm not sort of sure where to start or what way to implement that in my teaching. So what would your advice be in relation to the best ways to start trialing the constraint-led approach in their teaching?
It's all of it, mate. First of all, it'd be wonderful if people wanted to start changing the way they talk. Because I think the students would appreciate that, and I think it'd have a greater impact on them. So I suppose if people are familiar with TGFU and game sense, operationally very similar. The difference with constraints approaches is it's based on a particular learning theory, and it's grounded in that. So that's where it started. Plus, also it's applicable across more than just games. It's applicable to swimming, track and field, diving, a lot of different sports, and it's an actual way to teach techniques, not just games for understanding. It's also a technical approach. So the first thing is, I would suggest you can't, because I've taught for 24 years. I know how tough it is, and I've taught hissing drills, and I know how tough it is to change everything. So what I've come up with over the years is my advice would be to tweak things. So look at what you're doing and tweak it. So what I would start with, and I've had a lot of opportunities at university to learn because you don't have that constant merry-go-round of class after class. So things like, first of all, watching a group play, like watching a class play and working out, okay, what's one of the technical and tactical areas to work on? And it might just be throwing and catching or maintaining possession in a game. Could be endball, could be netball, could be Australian rules, could be frisbee. So the first thing is you work that out. But the main thing is you need to work out the rate limiter and the reason why. Why are the students passing and catching? Why is it poor? So that's the key. A lot of times it's defensive pressure. So the key to that is you need to remove defensive pressure or make it easier. I reckon give kids time and space. Could be congestion or it could be lack of experience. So if it's lack of experience, a lot of teachers, and I'm guilty of this, will turn to a drill. So if you turn to a drill to address lack of experience, it's not going to have as much impact. So, for example, rather than throwing a frisbee or a ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in a stationary position, something as simple as getting a group of three together and saying, I want you to pass the ball from this end of the field to the other, or I want to get that ball or frisbee from this side of the field to the other and back again. So all of a sudden, instead of standing still and passing a ball and practicing like that, we've actually got some representative learning design, which is a key principle of the constraints-led approach. So what that does is if you see what I've done is I've told students what to do, but not how to do it. One of the keys to this approach is you don't prescribe the technique. Let them work it out for themselves. They'll watch, they'll look at demonstrations around them. They'll say other students doing different things. They'll explore, they'll make mistakes, but that's how you learn. So something like, yeah, let's get the frisbee back and forth across the field and back. All of a sudden, you've got variability. You've got different types of flight. You've got different types of distances, different types of players throwing and passing it. So you're sort of covering a lot of those principles there. So that would be my first thing to look at. And again, you can evolve to a relay or a competition between two teams. And when students get good at that, you might do 3 versus 1. So a lot of people think, Joe, that this constraints that approaches, you've got to go out and play the game blindly, but it's not about that. It's about shaping the environment. And my first thing to do would be to shape those practice environments. Normally people use a drill. All you need to do is tweak it. So get a bit of movement going that actually replicates the game. Get the passing direction like the game. Have an intention like the game. And then you start to get this transferability from practice to the performance environment. And students will do a lot better. And I reckon they enjoy it. So if you look at those motivational theory, self-determination theory, which are those 3 needs, well, you're giving students autonomy, competence, and also relatedness as a working in team. So that would be one of my most simple little things to look at. It's a complex world. Let's not knock everything down. Let's just tweak what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think particularly at the moment, there's many teachers are probably listeners thinking this would be fantastic to include more of this in my teaching, and they're busy, and we know how busy teachers are at the moment, and it's small little things that they could potentially trial. So I think that's really useful. I guess just being conscious we're sort of coming to the end of the episode. I just wanted to see, is there any sort of key messages that you'd like to share with health and phys ed teachers from the years of research and teaching and experiences at the university?
I suppose the first thing would be to maybe pick an activity that you're pretty you've got a lot of knowledge about, something that you've actually played yourselves or whatever, and look at how you're actually designing practice environments for students, and look at not not cutting everything down and starting again. Just look at what you're doing. As I suggested, just tweak it a little bit. So the first thing I would do would be to turn a drill into a more representative activity, adding those movements, as I said, adding some variability, even if you change your opponent, even if you change the direction, if you change the length of the throw or whatever. And the other thing is maybe to have some intentions in there. So games have got intentions. Games have intentions like you need to score, you need to maintain possession, which does impact emotions. So just having challenges is really good to have, or having, can you get the ball back and forth in under 20 seconds? All of a sudden there's an intention there, which is like a game. And when you stand back and just watch a couple of things that you've just tweaked, look at the students. They'll start to scan and they'll start to make decisions. So that's a really important thing, and they invest mental effort, and it becomes more intense, challenge, and fun. But if they don't practice that, the game, I think, is too complex. It doesn't allow the time and space to practice any of this stuff. So a lot of teachers go from the simplest drill to the most complex environment, which is a regulation game. We need to build a bridge in between. So that would be my main message. And the other one is this, say less. My mantra is tell students what to do, but not how to do it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben. And there's some wise words to finish on. I think teachers out there are going to find this really useful. I know that I've utilised some of this stuff in my teaching, and I know that many teachers are trialing some of these more contemporary approaches. And to have some insights from someone like yourself that's got so much experience in it, I think people are going to find this really useful. So really appreciate your time today, and it's been great.
Thanks, so you. It's a real pleasure to share all the years I've spent in rooms and at university with people that are practitioners that I want to help. So, mate, thanks for the opportunity.